everyone. Today I'm going to paint this begonia. I took a picture of this from my own garden, but it's printed off just on a standard piece of photocopied paper, so the quality is not top-notch quality, but it's all I need for transferring to my watercolor paper. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, cover in the back with graphite so that I can then transfer directly to the watercolor paper. So to finish this process, I'll go offline because you don't really need to see this in its entirety. Okay, so now that I've painted the back with graphite, I use a pure graphite pencil by Faber-Castell. It's solid graphite, so when I draw on it, it covers the area pretty quick, so it doesn't take too terribly long. But it doesn't need to be perfect, because all I want is a guide of where the petals of my flower go and where the fly is. So now I turn this over and I tape it down. Make sure I get the right orientation here. Tape it down and I begin the outline of the petals and the fly. Looks like some kind of a wasp. And then I will mask off some areas before I start painting. Oh, I see I have a little visitor in my studio here. My dog has come to join me. Probably thinks it's time for a WALK, but it's not. Okay, so I just start by using a fine nib pen and go around all the petals and the fly. Again, I'll do this offline because you don't need to see how I do that. I'm sure you already know how. Now that I have that done, I'm just going to take this paper off carefully so I don't damage my paper, although it's stuck down very loosely so that it doesn't leave any glue on the watercolor paper. Well, that turned out pretty good. So now what I do is just finish off. Obviously this leaf continues on up here, or this petal I should say. So I just finished that off. Didn't fit on my 8.5 by 11 paper, and I'll just fix up some areas where it didn't transfer dark enough. Okay, and same over here. This would go something like this, and this petal continues off something like this. I'm just using my imagination here because it's not on the photograph. And this one continues down here and out here. Now for the background of the painting, although there are some leaves in the background, I'm just going to leave those. I'm just going to suggest the color of leaves. I'm not actually going to paint their shape. It goes like that. Something like that. And now there's just some colors here in the background of the flowers that are underneath this one, and again I'm just going to suggest those. I'm not actually going to paint them in with any kind of detail, so I'm not going to worry about that part of the drawing. Now the next step is to mask out my highlights and my fly. Actually, there aren't any highlights that I want to mask out here. I'm going to cover the entire painting except for the fly with yellow. So yeah, I don't need to mask out any colors there. Okay, see you in the next step. My masking fluid is now pretty much dry, but I've really made a mess of this masking fluid, which is really unfortunate. But I couldn't open this silly jar. It's kid-proof, but it's me-proof as well. So I put some tape around it thinking that that would help me, and really all that did was allowed the masking tape inside the container to dry out. So I've really messed up about $11 worth of masking fluid there. It's not cheap. But anyway, it still did the job that I needed it to do for today. I've changed my mind a little bit about how I'm going to approach this. I was going to pour yellow over the entire surface and then paint in the darker colors after. But I changed my mind on that. What I'm going to do is actually just paint it with a paintbrush, and because I want to add the darker colors to the outside of the leaf, and if I do the entire, if I do a pour on the entire background, then it'll bleed into there if the paper's still wet, and I don't want that to happen, so hence changed my mind on that. I've got a good chunk of yellow paint already mixed up here that I'm going to use. I just want to transfer it into a smaller container. I'll use a little cup for that purpose. I was doing some testing out how to do spray painting, which is a whole new technique for me, but I need better spray bottles than what I have, so it didn't work out that well. Anyway, I've got all this lovely paint mixed up, which will work for me today. So I'm just going to start. Whoa, that's a nice, beautiful, rich yellow. This is just Lemon Yellow by Winsor Newton. I might not be able to do the whole flower all at once because it's going to dry pretty quick, and I want to get some of those other colors down on the paper before I do that. Otherwise it'll dry too fast on me. Bring this in with a bit of water so that I don't have hard lines on that petal. If I don't bring it down with the water, I'll get a really hard line and I won't be able to get rid of it, and it won't have the nice transition from light to dark. Okay, that should be good enough for that section. So a big section already to work on. I use Arches paper, 140 pound rough or cold press, which gives you kind of a rough surface, which is nice to work on. I'm going to use a permanent rose to darken up the edge of the petal there. It should blend nicely. The paper's still wet. Now I can go right over this because I'm going to do this one even darker a bit later. Same goes for this piece over here. See how the colors are blending in a beautiful color there. So you actually want to put them down a lot darker than what it looks like in your reference photo, because watercolor dries a lot lighter than it first goes on the paper. I really like the way this is turned into a peach, so I don't want that pink there. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow so that I lose the pink. Because the overall tone of the flower is peach, not pink. But add a bit of yellow to that and that fixes that up nicely. Once that's dry, I'll go over this and this one here in a darker color. But it's blending nicely the way I want it to. And a little yellow here too, because that was too pink. Well, I'm loving the color. It's doing exactly what I want it to do, which is always nice. Very exciting with watercolor, because oftentimes it does what you don't want it to do. Well, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes it does. Today it's cooperating as far as the colors go and the workflow. See, you can see this is already drying off here. So I will just dampen that, give that a soft edge, because we want soft edges on this. Transition from darker to lighter. So I'm just barely touching the paper with that. And I'm hardly using any paint either. I use a sponge, a wet sponge, to dry off my brush a little bit, because you don't want your brush to be too wet. Otherwise you'll get lots of blooms in this, and you don't want blooms. A bloom is where there's too much water and it removes some of the paint. Like you can see what's happening here. This is a bloom, but it just started, so it's not too serious yet. They can get big, they can look attractive, but I don't want any blooms in this. I want it to be a nice smooth transition. And you can avoid blooms by tilting your paper and letting the paint flow. Okay, so I'm happy with that piece thus far. So I'm going to leave it to dry now, and then I'm going to come in and do the same thing on the second layer of petals. Or I could go down here and work on this petal. Got some rough edges here, but actually the flower itself does have some rough edges, a little bit windblown, and some little parts missing on the petals. Okay, I'm happy with that piece so far. So while I was waiting for this piece to dry, I went ahead and painted in this piece and went for my walk with the dog, came back, and it's all dry now. You'll notice here I did a darker color. This is Windsor Violet. I'll be using some of it up here, so you'll see that color going on. So now what I'm going to do is add the shadow part in here, and this is also very much in shadow, and I will paint in this petal and this petal as well. You need to be careful with this so that you don't paint into an area and then let it flow into an area that you want it to maintain a brighter area, because if you're using a dark paint, for instance, and it went into like here, and it went into a lighter area, you're contaminating your brights, and you don't want to do that. So you have to be careful and check your reference frequently to make sure that you're on track with the way you want things to progress. So what I'm going to do is start with this section here, and I've got a bit of a dirty brush. That's something you don't want to do either. So what I'm going to start by doing is just putting water down. And into here too. I probably could have done that piece previously. I'm going to go over it with yellow again and paint this piece orange. See how nicely the color flows when you already have water down on your paper. So now I don't want to paint this piece yet, because the darker colors that I'm going to put would flow into where I want to keep it light. So that's a good example of what I was just talking about. Okay, so let's start with the permanent rose and darken this one up. It's okay to have the hard line between this petal and this petal. Just touch lightly and let your paints mix together on the paper. Don't force the mixture. They will flow together eventually. Now in my reference, there's a section here that's brighter than this piece over here. Now there's a lot of water pooling right there, and that would take a long time to dry. So I'm just going to pick some of that up by using a thirsty brush, which I'm drying out on my sponge. You don't want too much water, otherwise it will cause blooms when it dries and just takes too long to dry. So minimal amount of water, just the amount to allow the paints to blend together. Okay, so now I'm going to use a little bit of the Windsor Violet, which to me is a must-have in any palette. Makes a great shadow color, is beautiful on its own, blends well with other colors. It's semi-transparent, or transparent, so it will allow other colors to show through. But in this case, I want it to mix with the color underneath. And I'm going to leave that section brighter, so I won't go into there with the violet. I'll just let the violet flow over, which it'll do a fair amount. Okay, that's probably as dark as I'll go right now. You can always darken things up later, but it's more difficult to lighten them. So I'll just leave that the way it is. And now this area here is also in shadow. So again, I'm going to put some water down first. It's a bright little section in there that you want to maintain. Okay, so we'll see what it looks like by putting the violet over the dry paint rather than where here I had 3 layers of wet paint. Here it was dry underneath, and now I'm putting the violet in. So it should go darker because it's not mixing in with the paint underneath, which is fine because it's a dark shadow. And the orange still, or peach color still shines through, which is nice. I'll lighten the shadow up a little bit here because that's the way it is in the reference. Okay, I'm happy with that. Just thinking of where else I can do a section right now, and I can do this section without butting up against something else that I want to keep light. So we'll just go in and put the yellow straight onto the paper there. Being careful. Looks like I can go right into this here. Remember, this is dry, so not to worry about that. That won't bleed through. It's nice to have paint mixed up in advance. I love this lemon yellow. So vibrant. And I'm actually being careful to paint within the lines. I'm usually quite a loose painter and don't have quite so much control, which can give you some nice effects as well. But in this particular case, I really want it to look like the flower in the reference, so I'm just being very careful to stay within my drawing. Okay, so now we're going to add the permanent rose, just like we did before. Again, just lightly, because you just want to put it over top of that yellow and let it blend through on its own. So just a light touch there. This will be in shadow, this little part here after. And you can see, same thing as last time, it's turning quite, it turned quite pinky, so I'll add a bit more yellow to that to get it to be that peach color that I'm looking for on this. And the paint will eventually bleed through onto that, so you don't have to worry too much about moving it in there. It will move. Lightly encourage it, coax it along, but you want that part to be light, so don't pull it all down. You want to go, we want a nice transition from dark to light. There, again, very happy with that. And it looks like we can do the exact same thing down here. Good thing I don't have a teacup here. I'd be dipping my brush in my teacup. I have taken a drink from my watercolor water before. It didn't taste very good. Okay, so we got that all. I can actually paint right over that little dark spot there. I didn't paint over this one because it's actually green, showing through to a green leaf, so I left that, but this is just a dark spot. Okay, so let's put the yellow down again. Boy, that sure is bright. But you can see the difference there between the wet paint and the dry paint, how it loses that vibrance. So you can always paint darker than than you think because it's going to dry lighter and a bit duller too, but that's the nature of watercolor. It's still very pretty. Just adding little bits at a time because again, I don't want my paper to get sopping wet and then take too long to dry because that causes issues, other issues, causes the paper to buckle. If I haven't pre-stretched this, so I don't want it to buckle. All right, and now we go with the permanent rose. Oh, I could have gone right over there. I still will after I get rid of some of this permanent rose off my brush. And that's what I was saying. You need to really pay attention to your reference photo because it's easy to miss little things like that as you're getting caught up in the process of painting. Okay, so we're gonna just get rid of that pink for now. And put some yellow over here because I'll be darkening that up with the Windsor Violet later. Put a little bit too much down. And I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to this because it's a little too pink. Seems to be the way it's going there. I got a little bump in my paper here, so that means the paint's going to pool over there. And I don't want it to pool. I'll coax it down here a little bit. I can put this, do this in the permanent rose as well. Okay, so I need to let that dry before I can paint alongside of it, but I can do this one here. I can paint right up to here, this one. I can paint all that section yellow. And this too. Whoops, that bled a little bit, but that's okay. I forgot that was wet. That's what you have to be mindful of. So best not to do huge sections anyway because it's going to dry out on you before you get the effect you want. You're going to have hard edges and you don't want hard edges. I also just had to make sure that I turned my recording on. I've done that before too. Forgot to turn the recording on, painting away, thinking I'm recording, and I'm not. Okay, once again, we can add the yellow. Wow, I just love the way those colors are so vibrant. I hope it stays somewhat like that. Okay, so looking at the reference, I can add my permanent rose all the way along on this. I have a better reference that I keep on my desktop. It's the original photograph, which is beautiful and bright. And I'll upload that in the video so you can see that too. So this is the shadow area. And this is also a shadow area. So I don't want this to go too far over into this bright area and darken it up too much. Probably shouldn't have been flicking my brush there. It did a little spot. Doesn't matter there, but it, you know, you don't want to dirty up your paper in areas where you can't cover it. Oops, I didn't want pink there. I wanted orange. So I need to add yellow, not more pink. I'm contaminating my yellow, which is not good. It's because I didn't get all the pink off my brush. That's why the sponge is handy for that. It's not too bad. I can salvage it. See how the water's pooling here because there's a bump in the paper there? Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done those 3 sections there. I probably should have stopped there so that I could keep that bright yellow for now. But when I darken up these shadow areas, it should work out in the end. Okay, looking good. Yeah, I can do it around here, but I want to keep this center area bright, so I'm going to leave that for now. It's not a shadow area. Okay, looking good. All right, now I'm going to paint my shadows down here. So that's going to be Windsor Violet, and the shadow goes right into this section here as well. It's not 100% dry, but it looks like it's okay for painting over top. And there's a shadow there. I'll grab some Windsor Violet. And put it in here. There's that nasty little bump in the paper there. Okay, and now see here, I added that little dark spot and the paper was a bit wet, so it kind of spread out on me. So I shouldn't have done it so early, but I'll see if I can fix it a little bit. It's kind of a tear in the petal is what it is. And you can see here, it's not quite dry enough yet, but I'll be able to remove that after. Okay, so I want to keep this fairly light, and I can go in and do this section here. Obviously that was a little wet too, but I should be able to fix that. I'm getting ahead of myself here, not letting it dry enough. All right, so this is a big leaf down here, or petal. I keep calling them leaves. They're petals, not leaves. So I should be able to just go ahead and paint that yellow. Yeah, it goes all the way. I remember this plant when it was growing, it was just amazing. It just kept producing all summer long. It was just gorgeous. Haven't been able to find one since. It's an annual, so didn't come back. Just threw it away in the fall. Okay, yellow. I can go right up on this one too. All right. And it's getting a bit repetitive. Put in our permanent rose. Not going to put in as much. This petal is further in the distance, so it's not quite as clear and not quite as vibrant. So I'll try have it look like it's receding into the background a little bit here. All right, getting a good 3D effect there as far as I can tell. So what I'm going to do now is pretty much finish this up off camera and come back to do the background and the fly and fix up my little issues here just by taking that off and brightening that. Whoops, see what I just did there? I just put a blob of water on there. So that'll create a bloom if I'm not careful. There. Okay, we'll see you in a bit to do the fly in the background. I've completed most of the flower. I just need to tweak a little bit on some of the shadows and define the center here, and obviously still do the fly. But I want to start tackling the background, and obviously I need to move to a much larger brush, and I'm just going to do a loose background in greens and probably add a little bit of orange. We'll see how it goes, but it's just going to be vague. I'm not going to put any detail of the leaves and branches in. Well, not that these flowers have branches, but they do have leaves. So I'm going to start by wetting down the background, at least one side of it. I think I like how the flower's looking so far. Probably want to do this fairly dark as well. So I'm going to use some blues and some greens. And probably put a little bit of the, the peach colors here and there to indicate other leaves that, not leaves, sorry, other flower petals, because there would be other flowers around this flower. It's not all alone on this plant. So I'll start first by putting in some yellows, because I can always darken them up. And I'll put a little bit of permanent rose on that, because that's the color that our main flower is. And now get darker in and around here. I'm not really following my reference photograph too much here. So I'm going to start by putting in, well, I guess what I could do is mix my green, so I can actually let it mix on the paper. I'll put some yellow. This is still the Winsor Newton Lemon Yellow, and probably a phthalo blue to get some dark greens there. See how that goes. Phthalo, or it doesn't look like I have that open, so I'll use try Prussion Blue. Ah, nice bright green, look at that. Needs a bit more yellow there. Ooh, that's a bright green. Maybe I should go. Okay, once again, like I said, I can always go darker, but I kind of like that for now. And wet some more up here. There could be some blue coming in from the sky. A little bit of Cerulean Blue up here. More yellow. Don't want it to get muddy. Oops, looks like I got a big hair there. Just using the tip of the corner of my flat brush to get into those little corners there. Corners of the petals. Even though it's a big brush, you can still do detailed areas by just using the tip. Now by tilting my paper, that'll allow the colors to flow a little bit. Of course, there could be other flowers nearby as well. I'm going to try a little bit of indigo blue right next to the flower to try and make it pop a little bit. I love indigo blue, but you don't want to overuse it, it's very dark. Just kind of makes the leaves pop off the page. Certainly dark. So this gives the impression of leaves. A bit too much water there. Okay, I'll continue working on that and come back and show you what it looks like. Because at this point I'm just kind of experimenting with the flow of the paint on the wet background there. I didn't have a clear idea of where I wanted to go with it when I started it. I finished the background just painting with yellow and Prussion Blue, some Windsor Blue, some of the permanent rose and a bit of indigo, and just did it loosely, kind of an abstract type background. You want it dark enough so that the flower kind of pops out of the background. Now, had I thought things through a little more, I would have actually painted the fly as I was painting the the petal, because the yellow of the background shines through. So he's got transparent wings, so I could have at least done the wings. And of course he's got yellow stripes, so that could have been done as well. And then just paint the dark color over top of that. So now what I need to do is just paint the background after the fact and let it dry, because I won't be able to paint the detail on his wings and back until that is dry. So I actually lost time doing it this way. Not that it's in any great hurry to do it, but it probably would have looked a bit better. It would have been more the same as the background instead of done after the fact. But anyway, it will work. It will work. So just want to do it lightly. Just on the wings with the permanent rose. A little more yellow. And I can apply some of the dark color. I'll go with adding a little bit of the Windsor Violet along here. And up here a bit too. And now I'm just going to let that dry. So there's nothing else I can really do until that does dry. But I will mention that as you're painting this, you need to be aware of what petals are whole petals, especially in this figure here, because you've got shadows of the petal is curved around and you've got shadows, and if you don't do it as one unit, same with this one here, because it's got shadows here and here, and it's easy to get lost as to you know, does this one continue on or does it stop here? So I went in and I darkened where the petal actually, the edge of the petal, to make it more obvious that this is all one petal. And I believe that this does look like a you know, a curved petal here. So hopefully I got that right. Anyway, just something you should be aware of as you're painting. So I'll come back after that dries. All right, that's dry now. So I'm just gonna paint this little fly. It's got a few highlights that I'll watch for. I'm just using whatever darks were left on my palette there from whenever I mixed up some darks. Probably ultramarine blue and sepia is what makes the darks there. Okay, this part is the dark part. Just using a small brush with a good tip. I don't have any expensive brushes. Don't know what kind of a fly this is. And very tips yellow. And the veins of his wings, I'll probably just adjust them. Looks like I'm gonna have to do a layer of pink over top of that. And same for this. It's got some highlights there. I might, I could use a little gouache or something like that to add in the highlights. And I'm going to use a different yellow to paint his back here. Whoops. It's just a big blob of water. Kind of an orangey yellow. Seem to have got something in my throat there. I have what's called a jelly roll pen. If that's dry enough, I can put some highlights on his wings and this here. So that's about it. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video today, and if you haven't already, I'd appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. I upload about one video a week, sometimes acrylic, sometimes watercolor, and if you do subscribe, then I look forward to seeing you here again. So thanks for watching my channel today. Bye bye.